we invite our clients to send us the financials that they get. We'll actually look at real practice
Mhm.
set of financials that we'll review. And I keep seeing all over the place, ChatGPT is going to overtake Excel. It's not quite there yet.
Not
I'm
quite
telling you.
there. All dentists know the common career paths, but how do you know which path is right for you, and are there other options out there?
On this podcast, we will be chatting with industry experts. We want to bring you the knowledge and resources you need to take your career to the next level and break down those industry secrets interview by interview.
We are here to ignite a revolution in the dental landscape
And help you, the dentist, build the career you have always wanted.
I'm Dr. Cassidy Reeder,
I'm Carter Frank.
and welcome to the Revolution Dentistry Podcast. I'm Dr. Cassidy Reeder here with my co-host Carter Frank. This is the Revolution Dentistry Podcast, where we help you with strategies to build lasting success for your career. Today we have a really awesome episode lined up for you guys. It's super unique and it's going to be extremely helpful for people who are looking to buy a practice, right? So I have with us here today Austin Moffat, who's a highly regarded authority in dental accounting and fractional CFO services, currently serving as the managing partner at DSO CFO, who has recently merged with Aligned Advisors. This specialized firm is dedicated to delivering comprehensive financial solutions to dentists, DSOs, and dental group practices. Austin has become a valuable resource for practices aiming to achieve sustainable growth and access necessary funding. At DSO CFO, Austin leads a skilled team that provides customized financial services, including bookkeeping, tax planning, strategic financial management, and growth funding. His expertise includes the financial complexities of multi-location dental practices, ensuring they operate both efficiently and profitably. His leadership has played a crucial role in the successful growth of many dental practices, equipping them with the financial clarity and support required to thrive in a competitive landscape. All right, you guys. So today is Austin's second time joining us. We didn't get enough of him the first time. We're like, we got to get him on a second time. There was so much to unpack, and he's so awesome for hopping back on here with us today. On this occasion, what he'll be doing is walking us through some practice financials for a specific acquisition deal. Okay, all of the details, are blocked. So we're respecting everyone here. Just wanting to give you guys some information and give you guys an example to provide analysis to help us determine, what's a good practice acquisition or not. So I actually found myself doing this exact same research, as a practice owner myself and as someone who's constantly looking to acquire more. And I'm entrepreneurial, and that's I'm hoping that we've drawn a lot of entrepreneurial dentists here on the podcast. So I found myself looking for this exact same type of breakdown from a professional such as Austin to help us understand what to look for, pitfalls, good things to look for in a practice acquisition. So without further ado, all of that, go ahead, Austin, take it away from here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and I just have to tell you guys, no one does introductions like you guys. It is insane.
Yeah, and no, hey, I've got some practice with it. I'm just grateful I didn't stutter. Right.
No, it was so good. I remember the first time I came on here, I was like, man, I just saw this clip and they were introducing Tiger Woods at a tournament on the tee box, and they went through like 5 minutes of all his championships that he won. Definitely not to say I'm nowhere close to that
You're
pedestal,
you're
that's for
close.
sure.
You're close.
I doubt it. No, I appreciate it, Cassidy. Thank you guys for having me on.
Of course.
I think this is so good. I think it's such a good topic. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurial doctors out there. They want to grow, right? They feel like they have, really done it at the current locations that they have. Look, you could be a doctor with a single practice, right? And say, hey, I've got this dialed in pretty good. How awesome would it be to kind of have this times two, right? I
Right.
mean, logically that's sound, right? But that's a topic for another time. It's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, unfortunately, in those situations. But I think before you even get to the 1 + 1 = 2, you need to find a practice that makes a lot of sense. And we have goodness, I think we currently have close to 8 to 10 in that ballpark clients that are currently looking
Hmm.
for practices to add into their current group or to expand. Actually, I'll be honest, it's probably closer to 13, 14. If it be, we have quite a few that are
Wow.
looking to grow, and so we invite our clients to send us the financials that they get. So one of those we'll actually look at. It's a real practice
Hmm.
set of financials that we'll review. I've to your point, Cassie, I've removed the name. It's good. I called it Moffat Smiles is what I've called it. But we'll go over it, and I think it'll be really good. And I think you know I w- my goal is to take the approach from like a high level financial analyst, if you will, right? From really a cash flow perspective, right? For example, I've got this practice and then I have these other practices or this other group. So what does that look like if I were to add this practice and put it on top,
Okay.
right? What does it look like from a cash flow perspective? Does the model does it work and exist with the current set of practices that we have? So that's going to be the approach
Okay.
that I'm going to take. So
That's
without
great.
further ado, yeah, without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen for those of you who are watching via video can see this, and then of course for those that are maybe just listening to this while you're working out in the gym, you could use your imagination, I suppose. But
No, it's perfect.
okay.
Yeah, it'll be on our YouTube channel for anyone who's wanting to watch this and see the actual financials on screen.
Totally. No, cool, cool, cool. And I'm happy to provide this as well, so you guys can
Awesome.
shoot it out. Yeah, cool. Okay, so again, Moffat Smiles, not a real practice. All that being said, my grandfather was a practicing orthodontist in LA, so who knows? He could have dreamed this being a name someday. But this is a real practice financial. No numbers have been altered whatsoever. This is raw. It's raw data. And so we'll just kind of start high level from the top, right? I won't go into, educating, a P&L and what that
Yeah.
is, so, but I'll just kind of stay high level. So overall, again, so this is a full year, right? 2024, 12 months. Typically, you want to look at when you get a set of practice financials to acquire, typically you want to look at the last 12 months, right? So a trailing 12 months is what it's commonly referred to. So today, it's the end of May, beginning of June. So technically, you probably would want to see financials from, April 2025 through May 2024, right? That's
Right.
that's the most recent trailing 12. That's going to give you the cleanest data, the most recent data. And then on top of that, you would want to see a clean year. So a full 2024. I'd even go back to 2023 as well. But you want to get, a year over year view to really get an idea for trends,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So
It
that's
does.
important because you could have an awesome year in 2024, but maybe in 2023, 2022, not so awesome, right? So like was 2024 an anomaly or no,
Hmm.
right? Because if there's a massive blip, right, or a massive, injection in revenue or something, right, in 2024, then you're going to want to understand what is that and why is it? And if I take over this business, is that going to continue or not, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of just questions that, I mean, look, this is a massive investment, money, capital, your time, who knows, right? And so you need to really do your due diligence. And just from a financial perspective, those are questions that you need to be asking yourself. And Cassidy, feel free to interrupt me, by the way,
No, no,
like at any
yeah. I
time.
think that was a great point. I mean, like if you, for example, see a practice whose financials are insanely great in 2024, but terrible 2023, 2022, what happened? Did the doctor recently go to a CE course for ortho and just
Right.
start like ramping up a ton of ortho? But like, you got to figure out questions like that. If you know how to do ortho, you buy in this practice. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, no, correct. And so for this, I'm keeping it simple and high level. So we're just going to look at a full year 2024, right? Again, normally you'd want to see 23, 22, but for the sake of time,
Yeah,
and the circumstances, so we're going to keep it high. So
I like it.
well, Yeah, let's just go in. I mean, so again, raw data, right? So a $2.2 million revenue practice. Now this is cash, right? So you want to look at things on cash, not accrual. Cash is what you actually received, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of times we have doctors who they would want to show what they did in production, and I think that's awesome. You're going to want to get that practice management, data for sure, but you're going to want to see things on cash because
Hmm.
that's what you pay your taxes with. When you go to get lending or funding for growth or funding for really anything, you're going off of a cash. You go to the bank with cash, not what's
Produced.
potential, right? Produce production, right? So this is all, just keep that in mind. When we're looking at these data, excuse me, looking at this data. It's all actual what hit the bank account, right? So
Hmm.
$2.2 million practice, not bad, not bad. $1 million in personnel, so wages, right? We'll just kind of stay over rent, right? 91,000, right? And I know you're like, okay, Austin, this is great, a lot of numbers, right? Their net operating income. Um, Normally we would want to call this EBITDA, but they're not in a position really to understand kind of what that is.
Uh-huh.
So about 500,000, but then all in net income. So like after you've got your EBITDA related expenses, you have add backs in here, you have some owner doctor expenses, about
Hmm.
almost $400,000 in owner comp related expenses in here. So after everything's all said and done, you're walking away from a $2.2 million revenue practice. You're walking away with about $100,000 in net income.
That's pretty
Not
low.
It's not amazing.
That's
It's
pretty
not
low.
amazing. So it's not cash flowing. Here's what I've done. I've simply just added percentages of revenue because that's a huge indicator as to, is this healthy? Yes or no. Obviously, by looking at the net income, not super awesome, right? But we can understand maybe why it's not super awesome. Maybe there's some things that you feel like you do in your current practice that you can implement in a
Right.
potential right practice to make it a little bit more awesome, right? But for example, it's kind of confusing for me to follow this. To me, this doesn't really tell me a story. First of all, your
Hmm.
wages are lumped in one line item, $1 million. Okay, well, like how much are we paying our associates, our
Right.
hygienists, right? How much are we paying our front office, our dental assistants, payroll taxes? You don't know the answer to that. So you actually don't know if
So
you're
should that
overpaying
all
anyone.
be on a P&L always? If it's not, is that a bad reflection of
100%.
the bookkeeper?
I would say it's a reflection of the bookkeeper. Yeah, I mean, look, and it's a reflection of like who you have as who's doing your books, right? Do they have? Is it a dental background bookkeeper? Is it a strong bookkeeper? Also, look, the doctors and the practice owners, you're focused on like the growth, you're focused on the quality of care, right? And so sometimes you don't know what you don't know when you're looking at financials. And so if this is all you're used to, you're not given a ton of information as to like what's going on. And look, I mean, payroll is your biggest expense, period. It will
Y-
always be,
Yeah.
right? So understanding that breakdown is incredibly important. And in this case, when we got this, I said, okay, well, I can tell you there's probably some opportunity here, right, to kind of look at and drill into what's going on. Here's the other thing. So you have personnel here, but then down below here, which is again confusing because you have to jump around everywhere to figure out what's what.
Hmm.
You have doctor wages down here, and then you have spouse wages down here. So that's about 15%. So now you have payroll split into two areas. So you're
Hmm.
like, well, what am I paying in total payroll? I actually like, hold on, let me add it here and then add this and then add that. Okay, that's for me, that's already too complicated already,
Right. Right.
right? But also, you've got 45% here plus 14 plus there's 15%. So you're actually 60% of your
Yeah.
salary, or excuse me, 50% of your revenue is in wages, salaries and wages. That's really high.
It
Last
is.
thing, and then
Don't
I'll
you want to be at
sorry, go
50?
ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So,
Yeah.
from our previous episode, you mentioned
Mhm.
you kind of broke down what each benchmark should be in terms of,
Yes.
where you should, where percentages should be for your revenue to go. And you
Yes.
said that payroll should not exceed 50%. and
Correct.
that includes, you know, um,
The associate, the
the
owner
associate, the
doctor,
owner.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, yeah, and then
and
the
everyone.
hygienist, the front
Hmm.
office staff, the
Yeah, dental
assistants.
assistant,
Okay,
payroll
because
taxes, and the
right,
payroll fee as well.
right. So were you saying that was it 30% or 20% of payroll should not exceed? Sorry, should 20% or was it 30% of revenue should be allocated towards doctor pay?
20%. Yeah,
20.
so
Okay,
20% of the total revenue. Yeah. I know typically like the calculation is like, 32, 33, 35% kind of in that range of what the
gotcha.
doctors produce is what they're paid. That's where I think it's a little confusing, right? Because you've got that number, but really of the overall revenue from a general practice, doctors should not get paid or should get paid around 20%, hygiene 10.
Okay, okay. So that
Yeah.
makes up 30% of the 50% that goes towards
Yeah.
payroll.
And then 8%, and we'll cover this in the next tabs that I've got here,
Oh,
but
oh, okay.
no, you're totally good, but I mean this is incredible. I mean, this is the appropriate time to talk about this. So that's 30%, 20 associate, 10 hygiene, 8% of revenue is your dental assistant, 7 is your front desk. So there's 45,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got 3.5. It obviously some of these vary and they range, but 3.5 is payroll taxes. So there's 48.5 plus another 1% in the payroll fee. So you're 49.5 to be exact. But again, you've given yourself a little bit of a range, right?
Right.
And so that's typically how that's broken down. So, but you wouldn't know that from looking at this.
Right.
Like you
This one
wouldn't
doesn't show
know
any of
any of
that.
that.
It doesn't.
Correct.
It's terrible.
Correct. Yeah, so it's not awesome. The other thing is like you have your clinical or your dental supplies here. You have lab fees in here. So like, okay, like you have to go and like intentionally seek out, right? Like what you're paying, in
Gotcha.
these areas. You also have some ad back related stuff like legal fees, right? You've got
Mhm.
some tax stuff in here. So these things really they need to be extracted out when you're going to, sell your practice because those are not normal operational related expenses that you
Mhm.
would anticipate seeing on a month over month basis. And at the end of the day, what you want to show in your EBITDA or in your net operating income, you want that bottom line should indicate like a true net profit from an operational standpoint, meaning
Right.
what is the meat of the practice, right?
Okay.
Clinical expenses, revenue, all payroll, rent, marketing, all that stuff, right? And then, of course, you have some doctors, and it's totally cool to do this, it's normal, but you have some doctors that they'll throw in some personal expenses, right? As a business owner, they'll throw in like their car payments,
Mhm.
car insurance, travel, right? They'll travel, right? The some other I like legal fees, some consulting stuff, consulting fees. Those are all ad backs technically that you'd want to strip out,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because maybe me as an owner, I'm not going to want a consultant because I am the consultant, right? You know what I mean? Or like maybe I'm not going to be putting my car through the business,
Right.
right? Like I'm going to take care of that on a personal side. I don't anticipate any legal fees, right? Because I don't know. I don't have a lawsuit pending at the
Right.
moment, right?
Right.
So anyway, so those are things that you'd want to strip out or at least identify when you're looking to buy a practice because you need to identify what am I really from a realistic standpoint anticipated to take in or to add on if I were to buy this practice,
Okay.
right? And that's key. So I'm going to jump over. So here's
Yeah.
the raw financials. We've kind of gone through that. It's 5% profit margin. We'd want to see it a little bit higher, closer to 15, right? So there's some fat for sure in here. So let's go look at
And I have
what.
one more question. Sorry, and
Yes.
you're
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
great.
No, you're
So
good.
the 5% profit margin, that's obviously pretty low, but is that because the dentist is trying to show as little profit as possible for tax reasons? Or is it a
It
truly
could be.
operational issue?
It could be, there's a couple of advantages, right, to lower your tax liability by, throwing you you're paying your spouse, right? I mean, that's a win-win for the owner doctor, you know what I mean? Um, right. He's got a couple other stuff in here that he's running through. Excuse me. Um, But that being said, here's how I see it. And we'll cover this too in a second. His dental supplies are at 8%. That's 2% higher than where it needs to be,
Right.
right? His lab fees are at 7%. Again, 2.2% higher than it needs to be. Payroll all in, we identified that including the owner, doctor, and his spouse, they're at 60%. That's 10% higher than where it needs to be. In just those areas alone, he is 14% too high.
Wow.
14% already. So the way I see it, and look, let's just do quick math while we're talking about it, right? I mean, if we just did 14% times the 2.2 million in revenue, it's $315,000.
Oh
So he's
my
about
gosh.
$315,000 too high in fat, the way that I see it,
Yeah.
right? So massive opportunity right there.
You could jump
Massive.
from 5% net income
To
to
20.
19 or to
Yeah, that's a
20.
crazy
19,
jump.
20. Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Huge. Huge. Right. And then, so again, going back to our initial podcast, that's where, setting financial goals for your practice is so important because what if you're at 8, but your goal is really 6%, right? And if you're not reviewing your financials on a regular basis, and sorry to jump around, but it really does go down to this. If you're not reviewing your financials on a monthly basis, then how do you know if you're over, under, or at goal, right?
Right.
Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't, right? Maybe you think, maybe reviewing your financials on a quarterly basis is good enough. I would disagree strongly, right? I think
Right.
the sooner that you can identify where you're over and where there's some fatty related expenses, the better for you, the better for everyone.
Hmm.
So look, 315 is nothing to balk out. That's a full executive salary right there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So huge, huge, huge opportunity
Absolutely.
there. So I'm going to jump over to what I'm calling the analyzed financials. So this is what, we take those raw financials and then we'll say, hey, we're going to reorganize, we're going to restructure, how the financials are displayed, right? Because the raw financials aren't really telling a story, right? They're just here's the numbers, boom, there you go. Well, we want to actually have these financials speak to us,
Right.
right? They want us to speak dental to us. And how do we do that? Well, we've now created, for this example, right? We've now created, a parent category called clinical related expenses. So now you know exactly what you're paying on the clinical side of things. So your dental supplies, right? None of these numbers have changed, by the way. So I just want to point this out. Net income is still 103. Net income on the analyzed is still 103 to the penny.
Uh-huh.
So no numbers have changed. All we've done is just reorganize and restructure
Okay.
the financials so that it's just flowing a little bit better. It's giving us a story,
Okay.
right? So clinical. Now we've got it right here. Okay, all in. He's paying 14% of clinical expenses.
Gotcha.
He needs to be at 11, so he's a little bit higher here,
So
right?
the bookkeeper originally put, like, for example, under clinical expenses, you have dental supplies and lab fees. There was not that section. You made that section. You had to go
I
and pull
created this
those
section.
figures out from
Hmm.
just some random parts on the original P&L to go
Correct. Yep.
make that more easily understandable. Got it.
Correct. Yeah, it flows better. I mean, look, I just met with a doctor yesterday. It was my last meeting of the day. I'm a three practice a doctor out of Manhattan, and I sent him the financials, and he goes, "Awesome. Would you mind just creating a summary tab and just show me total income, total dental, total clinical expenses?" And he meant dental supplies, total doctor wages, total office, like the rest of the office wages and net income. So five. He's like, just give me the total for the April and then for year to date, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's a key performance indicator, a KPI, right? And so what we've done is we've actually created these parent accounts, if you will, of these KPIs because these are the key expenses, right? That every doctor needs to be aware of what they're spending. And so all we've done is we've said, hey, here you go. Here are your KPIs. You don't need to go searching for it. We've actually presented it for you here very nicely,
I love
right at
it.
the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then we have the general practice benchmarks here. So now you're comparing your actual versus where you should be. So now you can start analyzing how are we doing versus where we should be, and then it makes it really easy to identify maybe where you're fat and where you can improve.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so we've already identified clinical expenses actual is higher than where it needs to be. Marketing is fine, right? But it really kind of depends on you. Every business model is a little bit different. Some people like paying 3%, some people like paying 5, so there's a range. Some people like paying nothing. We have a couple clients that they pay $0 in marketing and they just have a very good referral program.
Wow.
And that works, right? There's a couple other things. So now we kind of start getting a flow. It's a little bit more digestible. We've got bank service charges at 70K,
What the
3%.
heck?
That's that's wild, just so you
What's
know. Like
going on?
that's insane. Who's paying $70,000 in bank fees, right?
Is he
A year.
wiring
That's
every single transaction?
yeah, who knows? Seriously, seriously. So that's really high. That's silly to me. You've got telephone wages, or it's not telephone wage, telephone expenses at 16,000. That seems like a lot to
He's
me. And
buying the whole
16,000,
office iPhones. Just kidding.
who knows? Who knows? But that to me, I'm like 16K a year for telephone. That seems a little out of control. I've got made some other notes. 18,000 in accounting and tax prep. I think that's a little bit high in my opinion
Hmm.
for at least a single practice. Now, mind you, you know, in here is probably bookkeeping. Maybe I'd hope not, given the raw financials we just reviewed. But maybe paying for bookkeeping, and there's probably corporate taxes and personal taxes. But still, that's pretty high. Then for if it's just a single
Like,
practice, right? And
regardless,
then
right?
yeah, it's pretty high. And you'll notice that I've highlighted some areas. So these highlighted accounts are what I have identified as add backs, right? And so these are going to come into play here in a minute. But these are things that I would technically, if I'm going to do this practice, I would say I'm going to bring this to zero because, I'm not going to be eating out a ton, right? Or I'm not going to be traveling, $5,000, or at least I'm not going to be putting that through the business, right? So there's
Right.
like just a couple things that we'll circle back to, but there's a couple things, right? Accounting, I think that's a little high. Consulting, I don't think I'm gonna need a consultant. I am the consultant, right? With my knowledge, right? And that's how a lot of people think. I'm not. I'm not that cocky. I promise. I definitely know that I need help in certain areas. I definitely know that. But right, but there a lot of people may feel that way. Um, Anyways, I'll keep going. Now check this out. Payroll. Okay. Now I didn't get these numbers from them. I made them up.
Yeah.
But the total still remains the same, right? And so, but I just made them up. But now you at least have an idea,
Right. You had to
right?
make
Like
them
you,
up. You had to make them
yeah,
up, right?
exactly. And like I don't know, like all these are kind of like I really don't know if they're paying their associate 18%. I have no clue, but I don't know. It's probably a fairly safe bet. But at least you have a breakdown,
Hmm.
right? You at least know what you're paying. And then what I've done down here is I've actually added in the owner doctor, actually, his wages down here. So I've
Okay.
added him and his spouse. So in reality, sure, 45%, but not actual because you need to add in the owner doctor and the
Like,
spouse,
who do they think
which
they're, I mean, I don't think that they're trying to fool anybody, but
I
if
don't
they
think so either. Yeah, there's nothing funny business going on here. There's nothing funny going on about this. It's just maybe, it's fairly common for to be told, hey, owner doctors, you don't need to be included. In fact, we've had a couple of clients tell us that when we started with them. We've been told that we don't need to include our wages, in with the rest of payroll. Well, it kind of depends. Are you still producing or not? Because if you're producing, then yeah, for sure you need to be added back in the associate. If you're not producing and you're just acting as like the chief dental officer, for example, then sure, you can put your wage down here. That's fine, but it's still payroll whether or not you're producing or not. Like you're
right.
still getting paid from the business, and so that has to be considered
I've
in the
seen
total payroll.
right. No, I've seen a couple P&Ls where the doctor does include his pay in payroll, but from clinical
Yes.
only. And then he has a separate tab for associate pay. And then
Yes.
at the very bottom, it'll say like dividends taken, or sorry, not dividends taken. It'll say
Like draws or share or profit sharing, maybe.
yeah. And I've also seen another P&L where the doctor wasn't in the payroll at all, and all he had was a customary wage at the bottom
Okay.
outside of a
Okay.
payroll. It said doctor's customary wage, so it wasn't even in the payroll section, right? So I was like, and it was like 120,000, right? And he's the owner.
Yeah.
And then it said the rest of the net profit was just his take home. So like dude was making like 700 grand with like 50% overhead on this practice that was pulling in
Assuming he
like
was actually taking
1.5.
home that money, though, right? Assuming he was actually taking the net income in for himself.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
assuming he didn't invest that back into the practice.
Sure. Yeah, and that's okay actually, right? That's okay. Because you have to think of it like this. And again, kind of putting on my acquisition hat here.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a doctor and I'm looking to buy, I'm looking to buy this practice. Um, I need to know what I'm expected to pay a doctor, right? So, like, if you have the salary doctor down here, my question is he producing yes or no, right? Is he contributing to this $2.2 million, right? If he is not, and he's purely acting as the chief dental officer, then okay, sure, his wage is just an executive salary. There's zero contribution to revenue. So in theory, you can be like, yeah, that's not going to happen because I'm going to be getting paid off of what I'm producing.
Right.
So I'm out, right? Well, I'm not bringing my wife on, so like that's also not happening, right? And look, that just went up from what was that? That was 5% to 21%, right? Okay, but also I'm gonna be paying my doctor like truly what they deserve, right? Which is 20%. Anyway, so I'll show that in the next step.
Yeah.
But you have to consider that in the acquisition, in the assumptions, because you're gonna be paying a doctor, for what it is that they produce. And anyways, but anyway,
Like, yeah, it
this
depends
is
if
where
you're
a
an
lot of the
absentee
assumptions kick in.
owner or you're actually working in the practice yourself. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. This at least tells a story, right? Now, here's what I've added down here: loan payment. Okay. So, because if you're going to buy this practice, you need to understand what your anticipated loan payment is, principal and interest. And that must be calculated into the anticipated cash flow, right?
Right.
So, for this example, I created an amortization schedule. I won't get into it, but I just said, look, actually, before I get there, I might be going down the rabbit hole too much. I actually did a valuation on this practice
Uh-huh.
at a 4x a multiple. I've
Okay.
stripped out. Yeah, so actually, you'll see there are still some add backs in here, but I just did it purely off of the net operating income. There's some room to play with that number, but I just did on a conservative basis a 4x on a single practice, so 4x of EBITDA.
Yeah.
That was a 2 million. So again, this is just an opinion of value. There's obviously other things that go into this, like valuing the assets. Is a doctor staying on or not staying on? Right? There's
Right.
there's there's a handful of other things that go into it, but from a very high level, rough, I've got this value at 2 million. This is another conversation for another time, but the importance of having this net operating income, a true EBITDA with the add backs stripped out,
Yeah.
super important so that you can do this calculation at any time,
Right. The
really.
add backs
But
stripped out of the P&L and put back into the
correct. I
net.
mean, look at this. Yeah, so if you do legal fees, no collections fees, so this is like an e-assist or a medicine, right? On insurance verification services, right?
Uh-huh.
You're not planning on doing that. You're going to train the team, right? If you strip all that out, right, that just went from four something to five, right? That went from 2 million to now 2.2 million. You just gave yourself a $200,000 boost, right?
Right.
By identifying those add backs. Look, I'd like 200 grand. I'm sure most people would,
Right.
right? So again, it's the importance of keeping a clean set of books, and doing this method in a clean way. But that that being said, so going back to the amortization with this loan payment, I've got a valuation of roughly $2 million. I'm going to get a loan for $1 million. I'm going to maybe pay the doctor 500,000 and I don't, a little bit more over time, right? But I got at 8%. I chat GPT'd this just the other night. So these are all current rates
Awesome.
on 20 years. So you're doing about $8.3 thousand a month in loan payments. Okay, so now let's bring it back. So 8.3 times 12 is a little over $100,000,
So this
right? So
might be a
now you have
silly
to,
question, and I'm so sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you, but it's
no, no,
just
you're good.
something
You're
that
good.
I think others might want to know. So why only a loan of 1 million if the revenue is 2.2? It's because you
It's just the
multiplied.
structure. Yeah, it's just the structure. And there's so many ways to structure a loan deal, by the way. Like I'm doing it in a super basic way that probably no one would ever want to do. Possibly, who knows? You probably have a couple of acquisition professionals listening to this that are banging their head against their car window, right? Listening to this. Probably right. It's definitely not my specialty is that. But I all I did was I just said, look, it's a $2 million rough value practice. I'm gonna get a loan for 1 million. I'm gonna pay the doctor straight out. I don't know, $500,000, $800,000, whatever it is that the doctor agrees to. So maybe I pay him 50% up front, right? $1 million. Maybe I'm rich with capital and I paid 50% in cash up front,
Mhm.
right, to the doctor, right? And so then I would need to get a loan, right, to pay off the remaining amount of that value, if
Okay.
that makes sense. So
Okay.
that's all
Gotcha.
this is. So look, it could be, 1.5 million. That's just a lot of money, right, at the end of the day. So, but so I
Especially
just
for a
did super.
practice that's only cash flowing a little bit.
Correct, correct. And so anyway, this is all like what ifs, very, very scenario here. There's no like single way to take this approach. It's a
Gotcha.
super basic approach, but um like you could put in whatever you want to, but I just did easy numbers, right? So if you have a net income of 103,000 and then you add on your cash, your loan payment on top of that, it's $100,000. So your cash flow is not your net income. Your cash flow is after your debt payments, right? And you have to take this into
Uh-oh.
consideration. So, rut right now, you are pretty much breaking even on cash. Now, the question is, looking at this as it is it appealing? So, I'd ask you, Cassie, is this practice appealing to you?
Absolutely
Right? If,
not, because I don't have 500 grand that I'd want to. If this practice is worth 1.5 or went on the market for 1.5, right?
yeah.
And this was a scenario where we had to put 500 up front, and then we only took 1 million out in the loan, and we're still only making like $1,000 in profit. Like that's wild.
It is wild. Yeah, and look, I'll just say this, like this approach, there's no wrong or there's no right way to do this. There's so many different approaches to take. This is just one that we tend to do with our clients, right? And for me, I'm like, look, I only care about the cash flow at the end of the day. That's all I'm getting at. So like, how do we get to the best cash flow from a realistic point of view? That's all I'm interested in,
Yeah, I
right?
feel
Because at the
like.
end of the
Sorry, go
day,
ahead.
you don't want a liability on your hands at the end of the day.
No, you don't. I feel like this might make sense for a doctor. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense for anyone, but I'm just saying the best case scenario, this is my mind thinking about it, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you are replacing the seller as the main clinician and you aren't an absentee owner, because if you kept that seller on, let's say that you bought the practice as an absentee owner, you took out the loan, you kept the seller on, and there's still you know, I guess nothing else has really changed, then there won't be a whole
Mhm.
lot after the fact to then pay you as the owner.
Right.
And so, but
Right.
if you're the actual clinician, you can replace that seller as the clinician. The spouse is no longer getting paid, um, and then there will be some leftover, I guess, net income afterwards, from the way I look at it, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for me that cash flow it's not overly appealing at the end of the day. So for me I'd say, hey, like this is too much liability. Now, Now, for the final tap here, I'm calling this strategic financials. Now I'm saying, okay, I have an awesome business model. I know that our systems and processes crush it,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm actually only interested in getting a practice that's got pretty good bones, right? You've got a solid producer. The situation on the revenue side, the production side is solid, right? So, okay, cool. I can work with that, right? Because
Right.
once you get in, you're going to implement your processes that have gotten you this far in your business career. So taking a look at this, revenue hasn't changed whatsoever, right? It totally can, right? Because there's probably some clinical things that could probably be improved. But
Mm-hmm.
just focusing on expenses, let's bring the clinical expenses down to where they should be, right? So there's 6% of dental supplies. Mind you, this is not at a discounted rate like a DSO or multi-location like discounted rate.
Right.
It's just pure level, right? Just kind of walking in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So 6%, boom, 5%. All right, great. That looks good. 11%. So we know that's better. Marketing was, and I've got a little indicator here that I made to myself. Marketing was at 3%. I just said, hey, let's give it like an extra bump in marketing efforts. We're gonna look to increase revenue over time. So I want to inject a little bit more capital into marketing and into the growth, right? So we gave it a little bump by 1%. So that went up, right? Normally, you want to be in that 3 to 5%. So it's totally fine. You're in the area. Remember, bank services were at 70% at 3%. I said,
Mm-hmm.
yikes, that's a little
Yeah.
psycho in my opinion. So let's bring it down to 1%, which is 22. Okay, so that went down. Continuing education, that was very little. It was only a couple thousand. I just said, hey, I want to train up my team. I want them to be rock stars. So I'm gonna inject a couple $1,000. So that went up a little bit, right? So you can kind of notice I'm being a little bit realistic here, not
Yeah.
like cutting everything because that's not realistic and that's not a long-term goal that anyone would want, right? So I'm fixing some things, but I'm also adding some things in as well that I want, right? None
Right.
of these have changed. Accounting and taxes, I think it was 18,000. I think maybe more realistic, you cut it down by about 4 or 5,000. It's not a ton, but still, it's a couple grand still
Yeah.
in savings. So that went down a little bit. Consulting, it was at 7,500. I just said double it. Why not? I'm not awesome on the clinical side of things. I'm pretty self-aware, so like I know that about myself. So like I want an or like a clinical consultant to come in and work with me and my team every single month. So I'm going to pay 15 G's a month. It could be more, who knows, but I just doubled it for funsies, right? So that went up, right? And then we've got payroll is properly where it should be, right? So I'll go over that one more time. So associate wages should be at 20% of the overall revenue,
Mm-hmm.
hygiene at 10, dental assistants at 8%, front office wages at 7, payroll taxes can vary per location, but roughly 3.5%, and then payroll services at 1. Add that
Mm-hmm.
all up, you're at 49.5, call it 50%. So
Uh-huh.
that's a pretty good standard to go by. Okay, great. Nothing changed on rent. Now we're at 23%
That's pretty
EBITDA.
spectacular.
That's pretty neat. I like that. Let's just for fun, what is that times four? We'll do kind of the same exercise, I guess. I don't know. I didn't really think about doing this before, but since we're kind of talking about
Yeah.
it, um, it's 2.1. It's not much different if I'm being honest. It's not much different. Let's go back and see why it's not much different. 2000, right? So it's not massive, but
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. But I'll tell you, the magic is in the cash flow. So let's we're not looking to sell though, right? We're looking to see if this, if we want to take on this practice from a cash
Right.
flow standpoint.
Right.
Now I've zeroed out all those items that are yellow: depreciation and amortization.
Yeah.
Those are not actual cash related expenses. They're kind of, I'm going to call CPA related
Yeah.
items, right? But they're not cash, real cash. And I zeroed out everything else, right?
Right.
I've got these tax items. I have the doctor spout. I threw the wage back up top at
Yeah.
20% and the
You zeroed
associate
out all
wages.
of the non-necessary stuff.
Correct. And now you're pretty much the same as your EBITDA from a cash flow standpoint, right? You're
Wow.
beating kind of where you want to go. Let's throw in that loan payment of 8,300, a month, right? Times 12, that's 100,000. Now you're cash flowing, not break even. You're actually closer to $500,000 in cash flow.
Wow.
That's
Now,
crazy.
I'm probably a little bit interested,
Now I want to
right?
buy that and be an absentee
Right.
owner even.
Going from
Right.
breaking even
Now,
to
look, if
almost
you're
half a
absentee,
million.
Yeah.
right, right. Now, look, let's throw in absentee owner wage here. Let's make an assumption of, I don't know, like 125. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're getting paid, a little bit more than 10,000. Okay, cool. Guess what? You're still above um the benchmark, right? You're 3 points over. Guess what? You're getting paid $1.25. Go up more. You're getting paid, or excuse me, you're paying off your debt payment. You're still walking away with $300,000. You're probably taking a quarter of that. Yeah, maybe a quarter. Yeah, maybe yeah, around there. Probably in distributions on top of your 125.
Yeah,
Let's make
that's
it.
that's
Let's
a
make it
neat
200.
that's a neat
Let's make it two
practice.
hundred thousand. Absentee, you're getting paid 200 G's. You're at
Y-
15%. So
You
you're
just
at it. And look, you're
yeah.
still walking away on a cash flow on $250,000 in cash flow on
That's
top of that, right?
spectacular. It's spectacular what you can do with, when you understand how these ad backs work, when you understand what the benchmarks should be, when you're confident in your ability to go into a practice and make things, I guess, a bit more ideal, what can happen. Now, I suppose that doing this analysis is important because you have to see what needs to happen in order to get this
Right.
practice to a profitable or a favorable acquisition or investment. But what you mentioned that this practice in particular, the group that was looking at it decided not to go with it. Was it
Yes.
because they didn't want to put all that work in themselves? Was it because we see that the potential is there. There is
Potential's
there
there.
is a lot of risk, right? I suppose,
Right.
but is that
Yeah.
the reason why you think?
Yeah, I'll talk to you. The group, really cool guys. A little bit younger, actually, a little bit younger, and so they felt like it was too much of a risk. Yeah, they have three practices under their umbrella, so fairly small group. And so in order to go, they wanted to get something that was a little bit less risk, a little bit cash flowing a little bit more. There's a couple other variables at play. They felt like this wasn't the one for them for a number of reasons. But to your point, the potential is there. They just felt like maybe there was a little bit too much
Work
that they were
involved?
gonna do. Yeah, right. Work involved to just get it to where they wanted to. Now look, I don't disagree if I'm being totally honest with you, because I mean, look, this went from, and I will leave the $200,000 salary there, right? Never mind what you're getting from the other practices if you have other practices, but
Right,
you're walking away with 327,000 compared to 103. So there's a what call it a little more than $200,000 difference, right? It's a lot of work
yeah,
to identify that stuff out the gate. And so if people aren't up for it, maybe aren't confident, I would advise, do what you think is best. If you don't feel like you can get it there, if it's too much of a risk, it's too long of a runway for
yeah,
you, then go with that. I think that's super important. And look, some people might feel like this is super like unrealistic, right? I don't necessarily agree. Sure, let's identify some of the ad backs and maybe you can throw some stuff in here,
uh-huh,
right? But it's not gonna be $300,000 worth. You know what I mean? Of
right.
ad backs. So there's obviously room for people to poke at and play with and be like, oh, instead of this, I'd rather do that,
Right.
right?
Right. It's
Yeah,
individual flavor of each person
correct,
looking at it. That makes total sense.
correct.
This is a
Yeah, totally.
spectacular spreadsheet, Austin.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah. This
my
is your guys's.
gosh.
I'm giving it to you guys to share or
Really?
use or oh yeah, it's all you for
Well, you
sure.
guys, we're gonna put this up on our website with the Austin's podcast link right next to it, so you can have them side by side there in our resources tab. that's where this will live for people who want to go through this and follow the video along. And as well, if you wanted to maybe put some new figures in and just kind of play with it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
For whatever you
Yeah,
might
and
be
I
looking
and I
at.
can give you some notes, Cassidy. I think that the strategic financials is really the one where you can kind of add an assumption, right? So you could be like, I actually like five.
Uh-huh.
Well, this is live, or I like four, right? Like those numbers are live, right? So they'll change whatever you want, right? Sit back to six, back to five. Maybe I want to go for 2.5 million, right?
Right.
Well, that's good. That's gonna. Maybe I did one too many zeros, but you know, okay. But yeah, what is that, right? So this is a live document. So if you change things on the assumption, so do the figures, so does the bottom line, so does the
Wow.
cash flow.
And that's what I was seeing, is that this is a live document. So if you plug
Yeah,
something in, it's going to adjust for the whole thing. So it's like a real plug and
correct,
play spreadsheet with all
correct.
the formulas. Austin, wow, that's really nice of you, because not a lot of us know how to do that. I did take a course once in college. It's long gone. I did.
I know, and I keep seeing all over the place. ChatGPT is gonna overtake Excel. I'm like, I don't. I mean, look, I've spent hours, and I'm telling you guys, it's not quite there yet.
Not
I'm
quite
telling you.
there. I love it. Well, hey, you guys, everyone, this was such an incredible learning experience. Austin, you're awesome. We really have loved having you on. Your expertise, your insight is unmatched. I feel like this walkthrough was golden. It's worth its weight in gold if you guys really wanted to learn how to do this and evaluate things on, for yourself, and evaluate practice acquisitions. You can only do so much before you run into, okay, hold on, I actually might need someone to help me walk through a couple extra
Right,
pieces, right?
right,
Because
right.
you can. This is meant to kind of give you the basics, right? There are a lot of pieces. I mean, for people who haven't bought practices, it's really really detail oriented, getting into all of this. So like, Austin, if someone wanted to reach out to you and ask for your help on a practice analysis after, having tried it on their own and see how difficult it can be, make sure that they're not missing any important aspects of it, where can they reach you, and how could they ask for that help?
Yeah, I appreciate that. www.dsocfo.com. I don't know why I say the W's. No one says that anymore. So, dsocfo.com. So that was weird.
Old school.
Yeah, old school, I guess. And also LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I interact daily on LinkedIn. I was just messaging, someone who wanted to connect earlier today via LinkedIn. So I'm very active there. Pretty easy to get a hold of. But otherwise, go ahead and visit dsocfo.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. And again,
dsocfo.com.
guys, we'll have that on our website for you as soon as we can. Without further ado, again, Carter, I know that you've been, chomping at the bit here to get involved. If you wanted to sign us off here.
I'm definitely gonna rewatch the video. I now consider Austin to be the Tiger Woods of practice financials. Except,
yes,
you know
gotta get
how
him
you,
on a red shirt.
I was gonna say I'm kind of dressed like him. I just need red next time.
Red next time,
need the
and
Sunday red,
there will be a
absolutely.
next time.
hopefully
There will be.
rewatching your video goes better than when I try to rewatch Tiger Woods swing and copy it on the course.
Yes, yes.
Never
Oh my
played
You,
that
God.
you
checker.
have succeeded. You.
Fingers crossed it works. But anyway, thanks for tuning in to the Revolution Dentistry podcast. If you're finding value here, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're here every week to help you grow, and we'll see you next time.